For the circle theme today, we are going to look at weaving. So there's lots of ways we can approach that. The idea I had with the aperture that we cut for when we did the strip applique was applying, once we've done some weaving, a circle over the top so it fits to that theme. I'll just show you a few ideas and approaches you could have a go at today. So this piece here, I actually cut strips, cut lines up into the fabric, the backing fabric, and then just wove with a sort of cut and frayed piece of fabric up and under that. So what you've got here on the back is the weaving as well. I could have applied that to another backing piece, which is how I did this one here. So I had a backing piece of white, laid down and just stitched along the top, the bias binding the wool, and then sort of wove the other fabrics the weft way, the left to right way. So that's two different ways you can have a go with that. Then over the top of this, again, just to give you an idea for the circle theme, I've sort of laid a circle and just pinned it on temporarily, that this could be sewn or couched on afterwards. I've also got a solid felt circle cut out. That might be a nice way to interrupt some of the weaving. You could even pop little circles under sections of your weaving as well if you wanted to do something like that. Add in some sort of little half circles, perhaps. I could patch circles over this piece here. This one here was from when we'd done a visible mending session. So I had strips of denim in different sort of tones in the front and back there. I anchored that when woven onto the back of the piece of interfacing to stabilize it. And then by hand and on the machine, actually sewed circles over the top of the weaving to flatten it down. So that's often popular with weaving fabrics, to then add embroidery stitches over the top. This one here, similar to the one underneath there, did the weaving, but have left gaps to see the background cloth. You might decide to have your weaving solid so you don't see any of the back, or you might have that as part of the piece so you see glimpses of the background fabric, which you might use something patterned so you see glimpses of it through. This one here has been done all with bias binding. And then, like I said, this one here has been done in torn strips. You could always cut strips of fabric, but press under the raw edge of those so you've not got the raw edges showing. The other thing that you can do, which when I show you the Pinterest board in a minute that's linked off canvas, is these ones here all follow that plain weave approach, which is over one, under one. If you've done quite a lot of that before, what you might want to do to mix up your weaving is try going sort of over one, under two, excuse me, over one, under two, and try mixing up, which will then sort of distort the pattern of the weaving as well. So that's another way, another thing to think about. This here I've got ready is just some little strips of denim. And then this was a piece of bias binding that I've tied a little knot in that I've seen on the front cover of the Manipulating Fabric book, where before weaving, tie some little knots in your fabric for weaving before you sort of lay them down. So you get these little knots appearing on your piece as well. The other thing you could try is, here I had some negative space of circles cut out from previously, but because I've got that sort of cut out there and we're thinking of the theme of weaving, I could be trying going up and under shapes like that rather than cutting straight warp threads. Adds a little bit of interest as well. So lots of ways to approach the weaving theme. I've got my darning example here as well. So if you don't want to use fabric, you might want to use some threads to do a little bit of weaving, potentially in sort of little circle templates. But you could draw that rather than just doing the squares there. I'm just going to show you a few options of ways of weaving and different ideas that I'd mentioned and talked through in this video and looking at Pinterest. But one way, like I said, you can have separate warp threads or fabrics that are your vertical threads. But you can, as you may have seen this done on paper before, where if you fold a piece of fabric, you can just snip down through it. So when you open it out, you've got your warp threads sort of held with a banner at the top, bottom, and the sides. What I did to mix it up a bit was, rather than cut just straight lines here, I have cut ones with a slight kind of wave to them, so that when I take pieces to weave through, which I could also, because this is bias binding, I can't obviously cut it into waves, but you could kind of weave your, cut waves and different widths in your fabric beforehand. But I'm just going to try here just to show you weaving from right to left or left to right there. So I have gone over and under, and then I'll get just another piece here. So I'll be coming under this one. Over. So you're just doing the opposite what you did on the the only thing is, when it's sort of part of the backing fabric, what you find you're doing is, rather than being able to lift up and down your warp threads, you are having to just sort of fiddle a little bit with lifting it up and down. But you can see here, you can see that the vertical threads are creating, the fabric creating this pattern. So I could have cut, I've done sort of waves, but I could cut some real proper circles. So when it weaves, you can see those shapes. So I'm just mixing up the thicknesses and colours here of my bias binding. So I can complete that down to the bottom, and then I'll show you the result. So you can see there, I've woven quite a few of the weft threads now, which are the ones that go from left to right. So having that sort of curve to the background vertical fabric, it just gives you different shapes to see, rather than just the square shapes that are left by straight weaving. So what I've got here now is a backing piece of fabric, and I have anchored some of my warp fabric going vertically down. So at the minute, I've just pinned that in place. What I'm just going to try doing is, we can do just the over and under method, the simple plain weave. So because this isn't cut from the backing fabric, what I can do is sort of just fold up and away every other there. I've done it in so that I've got sort of pinky reds there, and then the blue. So I can fold those up, lay that down, and then what I can do is lift up the blues. So this here is just doing your plain weave there. What I can do to mix it up a little bit is try the next row, where I might go under 2, over 1, under 2. Then I will just lay this piece down and wrap those down there. And it begins to just distort the pattern really and mix it up a bit. So now here I've got sort of 2 solid blocks, but this one here, it's different. So each one looks a little bit different. So if I go from this side again here, of where I went under 2 last time, what I might try doing is go over 1 first of all, then under 2, then maybe over 1, then maybe under 2. So we're not actually following a woven sequence. If you have done any darning before, where we've done like the houndstooth or the twill, you've got sort of follow a sequence of over 1, under 2. But doing it this way, a little bit more organically, you just begin to get more of a patchworked sort of different effect. So here, obviously, I've gone over it 3. So I want to, on the next go, make sure that I go over sort of that one. So what I might do is go under 1, maybe over 2, under 1 and over 2 there. So if I lay those down, pop that down, that's sort of broken up the pattern again. And then what I might do is just go these up, go back to the plain weave next there, so that when I've gone, lay this back down, I've gone back to the plain weave, so I went over, under, over, over, under. So you can begin to see a bit more of a less obvious pattern is being created there. And it works well with lots of different colours as well. So I might sort of pull out some more of this mustardy colour and add some of that in. I could have also used the warp threads in that colour as well. So what I've got here for the third option is I've got some bias binding here that I've creased in half just so it's not quite as thick. And then I've tied a knot at different points in the strips there. So what I'm going to do is onto a backing piece, I am just going to lay these, I'll just pin them in place along the top for a moment, so that the different sort of knots hang at a different place. I'll just work that along the edge, along the backing there. So I've pinned those down just temporarily. You've got your knots at different points, just to add a little bit of texture. What I've got here is a little bit of thinner bias binding that's just got the knot in there. So what I can do is pin that over here at this side, right, over, under, over, trying to make sure that where the knots are, they're not going to be sort of covered over or end up going under. So you might sort of lay out your strip ready to go, and then choose where you're going to put the knot in. For this next one, I might just do one that is a plain one without the knot in there. I'll go over, under, over. But just having these sort of little knots in just adds an extra little element for your weaving. So I'll finish that sample and then show you that one. So I've left this one now where it is. I've only got a few knots going in the warp red there, and I've left some gaps, but as you can see, there's just the little interruption to the threads there with the knots in. So if I was then going to take this off, because I've just pinned it for now, what I could do is just sort of pin them so I can take it off my backing board, and then can machine round all four sides, or simply embroider around, or do have the option to sort of add little things over the top of them. I have seen sort of little circles cut to anchor down in places if you wanted to do that, or little buttons to hold sections down as well, and that would interrupt sort of the weave as well and add a little bit of interest. So the last one I'm going to show you again is with folding the fabric and cutting into that as our warp. But what I've done is I've just drawn around a semicircle with my chalk and cut my lines to sort of fit to that shape. So when I open it out, I've got a circle there. So what I can do is I can take strips of fabric and weave up and down to fill in a circle shape this way. I want to try and do it so that I can get the fabric to the back, so I've not got raw edges around the edge. So there's that way, and you'll end up with the outline of a circle. The other way is to cut some little circles out and have a play around with taking those under the warp threads at different sort of points. So I kind of alternate that in there. They might overlap a little bit. So I'll just try filling that little circle in here with some little circles that I've just cut out here of my calico. And obviously I'll keep always the negative spaces whatever I cut out for something else. So I'll just cut a few more circles for that one. So I've had a play around here with just keep tucking under those circles. Just lifted it up here, it's come out, but weaving those through those vertical slits as well is just a nice way to add in a bit of interest. So just little circles tucked under each one in sort of different sections really of the piece there.